Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
Welcome to today's Public Forum, and I'm always amazed that after all these years of doing the program, we from time to time come up with a subject that we've never addressed before, and that is the case today. First of all, welcome to the program Raleigh Juergens, who is the Vice President for Administrative Services at North Idaho College, and he's been in our administration for the past 20 years, and it's always a delight to talk with him, oftentimes over breakfast. And I discovered that he had written a couple of books for his young grandchildren, and so I invite him to come and do that. Welcome, Raleigh, to the program.
Thank you very much.
It's very, very unusual that we have the opportunity to have someone that says, I've done something that special for the grandchildren. So we are encouraging others in our audience to say, well, maybe you'd like to try this. And so thank you for being here. And I'm very pleased to have our panel with us, Janelle Burke, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Erna Reinhardt, who is the Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College, and Janelle will commence today's questioning.
I know that there will be a large number of grandparents, parents, aunts and uncles, all kinds of people out there who will be interested in this project that you've undertaken. Can you introduce the audience to your grandchildren, please?
Sure.
Tell them how old they
Sure.
are.
Our grandson is nearly 5 years old, and our granddaughter is 2.5 years old. And the stories initially came about from their dad. That's where the initial idea came from anyway, but they live over in Issaquah right now, and that's...
And you wrote a couple of books for them, and can you tell us what the titles of those books are?
This book is called The Pointy-Toed Ducks, and it tells a story about how ducks got webbed feet. You see, they initially started out with pointed toes, and at least in the book. And through a process of a very cold winter, they ended up with webbed feet. And one night, as most parents do, I was rather tired, and my son insisted on having a book read to him to go to bed, to go to sleep. And I kind of took the easy way out. I laid down in bed with him and closed my eyes and just dreamt this story up and told him this story, and I'd kind of forgotten about it. And I thought, as my grandson came along, some years later, my son now is in his early 30s, that it would be kind of a neat story to write up and give to my grandson. And my wife at the time was teaching 6th grade at Lakes Middle School, Jeannie, and as part of a project for an English class, the students had to take a bare book. That's a B-A-R-E book, and they buy these books. They're blank pages, and the kids had to write a story for this English project. And as part of the story, they were told to try to illustrate it as best they could. She had one young lady in her class, and this is in 6th grade, Lorena Helm, that really did an outstanding job. And she brought the book home for me and showed it to me, and we admired the book. And anyway, the next year, I got the idea, when she did the same process, I said, why don't I write this book for my grandson, our grandson, Axel, and see if this young lady would illustrate it for us. So I typed it up, and I gave it to this young lady. She was in 7th grade at the time, and she illustrated the book, and it's really done well. This is a 7th grader. See the decoration around the outside and the little ducks swimming around and walking around, talking to each other, flying, etc. I gave it to my grandson, and of course my son and daughter-in-law were real pleased with it, and I hope they keep it. I think someday it'll probably mean more to them than it does now even. But this was on his first birthday, is when we gave him this as a kind of a birthday present.
So it's a very memorable way to recognize your own family stories that you tell to your children.
Yeah. The second book, Lonesome Charlie, was illustrated by the same young lady, Lorena Helm, only now she's in high school, or she was when she did this illustration. We gave this to our granddaughter, Ellen, on her 2nd birthday, and it's about a coyote that lives in the mountains. Now, this happens to be the Southwest Mountains, not the Coeur d'Alene Mountains, Idaho Mountains, but the Southwest Mountains. and about how he lives his life and meets another female coyote. And we gave this to our granddaughter on her second birthday. I didn't get them done quite in time for her first birthday, but they were kind of a way to pass something on to our grandkids. It's easy to buy something, a piece of furniture, and pass it on. We have that. I mean, I've got some glassware, for example, that belonged to my grandmother that I really cherish. But this is more personal, and that's kind of why I did it. I wanted them to remember us.
Erna Reinhardt.
That is awesome. Welcome to the show, Raleigh. Tell us a little bit about the details about Lonesome Charlie. I know I've read that myself, and it's a great little story. Can you tell us, maybe even read from it? I'm not quite sure.
I'd like to read from it if I could.
That'd be awesome.
Lonesome Charlie is a coyote, as I said, that lives in the Southwest. And this is how the little book starts out. Once upon a time, there was a coyote named Charlie. Charlie lived in the mountains, and he loved it there. He enjoyed the views, and he could do whatever he wanted. Charlie lived in a den under an old log at the edge of a big meadow. Charlie liked to snoop around the old buildings in the mountains. He found mice there near the buildings, and he enjoyed chasing them. Charlie also liked to bark at the ducks in the pond. It was fun to watch them squawk and splash around in the water. So I kind of give a little vignette of Charlie's life. I go through the winter time, how it's hard for Charlie to find mice and things to survive on in the mountains. But then later on in the spring, Charlie starts to howl. He hadn't howled before, and it scared him. But he found some satisfaction in howling, and if any of you have ever heard coyotes howl, it's a rather mournful sound. And you could see how, at the first time you did it, it would be scary. Well, the book finishes up this way. One morning, after Charlie finished his howling, he heard a howl from down in the valley. This scared Charlie, and he dove for his den. He sat there quivering, wondering what could have made the sound. Other than his mother, he was the only coyote he'd ever seen. So here's a picture of Charlie sitting in his den, and his little legs are shaking, When Charlie peeked out from his den, there sat another coyote. Her name was Carrie. Carrie was from across the valley. Soon Charlie and Carrie became friends and often spent the entire day chasing mice at the buildings and scattering the ducks at the pond. Charlie was never lonely again. You can still hear Charlie and Carrie howl in the early mornings and late evenings. They are telling the whole world how happy they are together. So it's a happy ending, and I think it's relevant. I think for kids, it's fun for parents to read and something for the kids. They can imagine, here's a coyote the first time he howls and what he does during the day. So hopefully it'll be enjoyable for the kids.
The other thing that I know about you is that you're quite an outdoorsman, and it seems like your books have taken on part of that background as well, right?
Yeah, I've written a couple more that I haven't got in book form yet. And I say I've written them. The idea came from me. I had my wife, as I call it, English them, to go through to try to get the grammar as correct as possible, to give me ideas about changes, etc. So she needs to take some of the credit for this too. She's put a substantial amount of time into them too. But I've got two other ideas. One is called Monster Moose. It's about a moose called Monster that lives in Yellowstone, and now he grows up to become a monster moose, but that also coincidentally is his name. And then one that I've called Oreo the Firehouse Cat. Now, we all know what Oreo cookies are. They're black on the outside and they've got white cream filling. Well, Oreo's black and white too, kind of similar to the cat version, the feline version of a Dalmatian dog. Well, Oreo crawls into a firehouse one morning, and the story deals with how Oreo survives with the firemen. So those are two other, I don't have illustrated yet or in books, but it's fun to do. I like to write, and it's something I can leave my children and my grandkids,
Well, I think that is so interesting that I've known you the 20 years you've been here, and what's so good about being around a long time and with your colleagues is that you find these talents outside of their responsibilities at this institution, and I think this is really wonderful. I want to ask you a question that I've asked many times on this show with published authors. Over the years, we've interviewed a lot of authors of both fiction and nonfiction, and also people who have produced plays and drama production. And I guess the one thing that always intrigues me so much that I wanted to ask you is, we who don't do those kind of things, we often wonder, well, how does the idea come to you, and it's so creative, and you go through this sequence, and I was thinking to myself, well, I wouldn't know what to think of or where to start because my interests have been in other areas. You did say already on the show that, your son wanted you to tell him a story, and so you made up a story, and I understand that, but as you develop these more and more, there's some way that you form this idea of how you come across to having a certain theme in your book.
Yeah, I wish I could give you an answer for that, because it'd be nice for the audience to have a step-by-step process, but I can't do that. It's just something that came to mind.
Is it a gift or just something that's a part of who you are?
Yeah, it's just a part of who I am. I think honestly a lot of it came from my mother. She liked to write little poetry, and frankly now you look back on it, I've still got some of it, and it wasn't very good. But I kind of caught on to that when I was in grade school, frankly. I tried to write poetry, and I've got some Christmas cards and birthday wishes for her that I still have. And the poetry in it that I wrote is absolutely horrible, but I like to do it.
Well, see, there's almost an environmental family influence there.
There was a little family influence there, yeah.
One final question before I go back to the panel, and that is, again, Janelle had mentioned that we have a lot of viewers of different age groups and all, and we certainly have parents and grandparents out there, and some of them might be intrigued that they have not yet, but they certainly have the ability to tap that kind of talent, or they do have in their mind stories. How would you advise them to go about doing something like you're saying that's so special for their own children or grandchildren?
Well, to do this, all it takes is a piece of paper and a pencil, or a pen, or a computer, and mechanically it's simple. The difficult part, where I was extremely lucky, was to find a young lady, Lorena Helm, that was willing to let me hire her. And I want to keep pointing out that I hired her. I didn't impose on her. I hope as much as what the pictures look like, she put a lot of time in on it. But I was lucky enough to have someone that was able to help me, that was willing to say, yeah, I'll illustrate it for you. It'd be a fun project, And my wife was very good about, how many times do we have to reread this? What did you change? I don't see any change from this one to the previous one. And she's been very honest. I've thought about approaching a publisher to get the stories published, and she said, they're not good enough.
Nothing like honesty and candidness.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But she works with children every day, being a reading teacher is what she is doing now at Lakes Middle School, and so she sees the quality of things that are out for children now. But this was something kind of special that I wanted to do, and frankly, it's a selfish reason. You gain a little bit of immortality. As my grandkids grow older, hopefully these will become more valuable to them. And maybe their children, say, this is something my grandpa wrote, or my grandpa and grandma wrote for me, and it was fun to do,
Thank you, Janelle Burke.
I have a question that we talked just briefly before the show about. Some people are going to say, "Oh, I couldn't do that," and you're very inspirational in leading people to believe that they can do these things. No. It doesn't matter if the illustrations are perfect or if the language is perfect. So would you please share with us how you feel about that?
I've done a couple of things that are typically outside people in my profession, outside their kind of outside the boxes that people put them in. I've done some pencil drawings that people have seen. I did some chainsaw art for my front yard. I saw an owl in someone's yard one time, and I thought, I could draw or make an owl with a chainsaw. That can't be too hard. And then these two books, and people that have seen the books or the owl or the drawings say, "Oh, I could never do that. I can't ever do that. I don't know where you get the talent." And I asked them, "Have you ever tried?" And invariably the answer is, "Oh no, I couldn't do that." And so what it really takes is to try. I show people the pencil drawings that I've done, and they say, "Oh, that's great." And I said, "Well, there's not much lead on the page. There's mostly eraser, where I've drawn over it and erased and done them over again." And just keep trying until you get it right to your own satisfaction. And that's the key, you only have to please yourself.
I love the idea, and I think it could be expanded to be all kinds of
Oh, it
things,
could, yeah.
family histories, pictures, all kinds of things. I'll turn to Erna.
You bet. Being a parent and having 2 boys, and we read to them a lot, I remember really well that the boys always had certain stories that they were their favorites and they fell in love with. And part of that, I think, as I think back on that now, is that as you read a story over and over and over, and your child becomes more familiar with that story, their affection for that story just grows and grows and grows, because they know what to expect, and they see new things in the pictures. Did you have that kind of experience with your grandkids with those books?
No, I didn't.
Great build-up.
It's a great build-up, Erna, but I have to let you down. I'm sorry. I was hoping that's what they'd do, but they didn't.
Well, and
They
sometimes,
still, they
takes a while.
They still prefer some of the commercial books. Our grandson likes Thomas the Tank Engine books. He loves them. He's got Thomas the Tank Engine trains. Our granddaughter prefers some other stories with Cinderella kind of characters, female figures in them. So they haven't latched onto these and say, well, these are our favorite books because they're from Papa.
Right.
They haven't. I wish they had, but they didn't. And it doesn't hurt my feelings, because that's the way kids are.
Well, and they may that appreciation may come as they do get older.
Yeah.
And
Some
I
of
think,
it, honestly, is not appreciation now that I'm. I think as they get older, or even heaven forbid when I die, then they'll probably really appreciate it. But it's a nice. It's something I enjoy doing as much as just giving it to them. And they, other than for this show, they keep it in their house, and they're just like the rest of their stuff that they keep around the house.
So now, how about the 2 other stories that you have? Are you waiting for 2 more grandchildren
Well,
before you put them in books?
if I had 2 more grandchildren, I'd love to do it. Yeah, particularly Oreo the Firehouse Cat.
Awesome.
That's better. Monster Moose, I'm not quite satisfied with it yet, but I don't know if I'll ever put them in books or not. I might. It's hard to tell.
I have to say that in relation to Janelle's question, that you are very positive and really encouraging people to do these things. But I do just have to say, in some of our cases, mine being the 2nd grade, that I have not found a way to advance beyond stick figures. And I've tried, but I just want to, and people can do so many things I think they can't, but also for some of us, we try and decide our talents lie other places.
Right.
So that's a factor too.
That's right.
I would like for you to take us through the 2nd book. That story you just told, another one is just so wonderful. And
that was
and
Lonesome Charlie.
That's the kind of thing that our audience too can share with their grandchildren or whatever from this show. And if you read from it, it helps them do that.
This is called the Pointy-Toed Ducks. Once upon a time, in the very, very beginning, there was only one little flock of ducks. This flock was the first flock of ducks on the whole earth. A duck by the name of Alexander was the leader of the flock. The ducks lived on a small pond called Happy Hollow. They liked to puddle around Happy Hollow by digging their toes into the soft, wet bottom of the pond looking for things to eat. Wherever Alexander went, all the other ducks went too. But while the ducks flew like arrows and floated like corks, their tiny little pointed toes just didn't paddle very well. Moving across the pond caused lots of splashing and lots of noise. This splashing and noise caused all the other animals living in Happy Hollow to stop what they were doing to watch the ducks kick, splash, quack, fuss, and squawk as they tried to paddle around. The pond could be a noisy place. Then we go through, would you like me to keep reading?
Yes, please.
Okay. As the first snow of the first winter with its bright, cold crispness fell on the pond, the flock of ducks had a strange feeling. They felt like flying south to the land of warmer weather. The ducks began quacking about it to Alexander. They quacked and quacked and quacked. Sometimes all of them quacked at the same time. The other birds at Happy Hollow wondered what was so important. The ducks finally quacked enough until they'd made up their minds. Alexander thought that it would be best to stay at Happy Hollow for the very first winter, and the other ducks agreed with him. The days and nights grew colder and colder. The ducks got colder and colder, and the land of warmer weather they had heard about sounded better and better. Then something else happened to really make them wonder if they'd done the right thing. The north wind began to howl. It howled and swirled around the ducks. Swish, whoosh, it never let up. Soon the pond was frozen solid, and the ducks were getting hungry. Alexander led the flock as they flew off looking for supper. Alexander took the ducks to a field of corn. They loved corn. They landed and filled their stomachs until they were ready to burst. When they took off from the cornfield, the wind quickly forced them backwards to Happy Hollow. They flew faster than they'd ever flown before. The ducks were flying so fast that they were being warmed with the winds on their wings. It felt good to be warm again, but little did they know what lay ahead. After being pushed along by the swirling wind, the flock was soon high over Happy Hollow. The wind blew so hard that they couldn't slow down. Alexander decided that they needed to land in the same direction that the wind was blowing, and he told the ducks what to do. They were scared. They'd never done this before. They were moving so fast. What would happen? They followed Alexander down, lower and lower toward the frozen pond. They were still moving very fast as Alexander and the flock got closer to the ice. They tilted their wings and they tipped their tails, but they still didn't slow down. They tried everything. Finally, their pointy toes touched the ice and they began sliding across the pond. They couldn't stop. They slid and slid and slid. It wasn't long until their feet got very hot from rubbing on the ice. Suddenly, as quickly as it had started, the wind died down and the tired ducks skidded to a stop, falling and plopping backwards on their tail feathers. Behind each of them were 2 melted trails in the ice. When they looked down at their feet, they were shocked. They were steaming. The heat of the ice and their pointy little toes had melted their feet into something flat with skin between the toes. They had webbed feet.
I'm so glad to know that happened. All these years not knowing how to get webbed feet, so it's really finally come true.
Yep, it is. Yep.
I want to insert here at this point one of my favorite small books. And that reminded me immediately was Jonathan Living Seagull.
Oh, sure.
What a great writer and imagination. So I guess my question before I go back to the panel is, and you certainly see it there, can we sometimes communicate better with children or the entire public if we put a story in the form of non-humans? In other words, I think Jonathan Livingston Seagull's, the theme there with Bach was that he taught us how to rise above what we think is our potential, but by doing it with seagulls rather than humans, I think it was easier. Do you
Well, I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love stories anyway. And I love to talk to people by using stories, and I love to listen to people talk with me and using stories to illustrate their point. But you get a different
attention from it by doing it in this format.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you get altogether different because you remove the humanity in a sense, the foibles of people's personality from it.
Or even their prejudices about what humans
can
do.
That's right.
You're seeing that now in movies too, like Finding Nemo, where you have this whole school of fish and characters made out through the fish, but they've got little meanings.
And those are great stories. Finding Nemo is. It's a wonderful little story.
Awesome.
Janelle Berg.
Yeah.
I want to take us through step by step the process that a person might use if they're out there listening.
Okay.
One of the first things would be to decide on a story.
That's right.
Probably the second thing is to find an illustrator, and it may be yourself, it may be someone else.
Yeah, you could do it yourself. I'd encourage them, I think, first to write it, because until you write it and get a flow, and if you're doing it for children, it's got to, for example, my pointy-toed ducks is too long for children, I think. If I was going to be super critical of it, it's too long. Lonesome Charlie's better. It's about the right number of words, I think, for a children's book. But in order to get it illustrated, you need to have a flow from start to finish. And you need to, for children's books, I would personally not write anything that didn't have a happy ending. I read the ending on Lonesome Charlie in The Pointy-Toed Ducks. It ends as, "This is how the ducks got web feet and why they fly south in the winter. You can still see Alexander leading the ducks south in their journey. Alexander is the first duck in the flock. The ducks have lived happily ever after." And I think it's important, particularly for children's books, to end on a happy note. To stay away from things that are adult-oriented, death, dying. Those aren't for children. But once you have a storyline developed and a short story, that's a good thing about children's books. They're short. They don't have to be thousands of words long. That would help an illustrator then, because about every paragraph can be used for an illustration on a page.
And one of the things that you've indicated is that, and it's important to read it and read it back to yourself so you know how it flows and how it sounds, Janelle, and whether it works together and it expresses what you want to say.
I don't either mention during the show or prior to the show that as I read these now, even I'll come upon words that I'll either want to correct out loud as I'm reading it, or saying I would like to change that word now, but it's too late. And that's, I don't think, untypical. I think it's pretty typical, honestly. You find things that appeal to you certain times and others that don't. But,
and then you get a bear book, And where would
Right.
you find a bear book, do you think?
Well, you know, I got these from my wife at Lakes Middle School.
So maybe you might want to go to your local school,
Yeah,
but you might also go to a commercial bookstore, I
Yeah.
suppose, and ask
Right.
about a bear book.
Right. Yeah, they're just a little, 4x6 book with a hardcover on it. They also come with a cover slip to protect the cover on both sides. I took them off for this filmings because I was afraid they reflect in the light. But that also helps them last. The illustration has been sprayed with a fixative so it doesn't rub off, so that it'll last as long as possible.
So that's part of the
Yeah.
whole process. After you finish with
Yep.
getting it in the book, then you're going to have to do a few
Right.
things to make sure that it's
That's
protected
correct,
for
yeah.
the future.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially if children are going to use it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And even then, it, I wouldn't be too surprised to find tears in it and this kind of stuff. If people are going to use them, and kids are going to drag them around the house, they're going to get some rough abuse. So-
I don't know if we do this at the beginning of the show, but I want you to explain to the audience what you do in your regular life, 8 to 5, because
Oh.
it's very different than this.
Yeah. I'm the Vice President for Administrative Services here at North Idaho College, and the areas I'm responsible for are the college finances here. In that sense, I'm like the business manager at a school district. The computer services people work for me. The physical plant maintenance people work for me. I'm responsible for our buildings and the custodial care, the maintenance of the buildings, any construction projects going on campus. Campus security reports to me, and our transportation people report to me. That includes, in the computer center, includes data and voice communication also.
So, Raleigh, by doing something like this on the creative side of things, do you think does that help you find balance in your life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love to write, and I wish I was a better writer. That's a really frustrating thing about
No,
it.
we have to come to a conclusion here.
I'm sorry. Okay.
The clock always wins on this program. Well, every ending can always be just exactly what you want. Our good friend Raleigh Juergens, thank you for being here. It's been a delightful show,
Thank you.
and I'm sure it's encouraged people at home to
Good.
not only maybe have their children there when this program is on, but our grandchildren, but also to do things with them too. And
Sure.
thank you again. You've been generous with your time. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you to be with us again next week. As you know, most weeks we change to another subject, or sometimes we do a two-part series. And please be with us again next week when we will discuss another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.